Hi Region 18 violinists, I'm here to help you with your Region Excerpt this time. Okay, so a couple of things to note before we start. Our time signature is not visible to us, but we are in 2/4, so that means 2 quarter notes per measure. So in your head, you should be counting 1, 2, 1, 2, or 1 and 2 and 1 and 2 and. Okay, for your 16th notes at this tempo, it'll be like 1E and a 2E and a 1E and a 2E and a, and I think I'm still a little bit under 120 at this like snapping tempo. This is just what I remember. So yeah, just keep that in mind. Also, very important, you are in the key of A major. So you have F sharp, G sharp, and C sharp. The G sharp, since we're not as used to playing it, can be a little bit fishy. So make sure that you are truly reaching your second finger on the E string high if you are playing it in first position. And also in third position, which I will recommend that you start in, your fourth finger has to be super high, and then all of the stuff on the G string on the third line, your high 3 for your C sharp is usually the one that will be a tiny bit out of tune. So really try to make sure that you are listening to your instrument. So your instrument always tells you if you are in tune or not. It will ring more when you are truly in tune, and if it's out of tune, then it will, like, you're gonna notice that it's not as resonant. So you won't hear as much of a ring after you let go of your bow. Okay, so just to be very clear about where we start, you start on the last measure of the first line. We start on that E, okay? And we also start on an up bow. Now, what I really think is smart for you to do is to start in third position. So making sure that your E is going to be in tune with your E string. I would always check it right before I start. And we're gonna start in a third. So your fingering right there is gonna be 2, 3, high 4. And it's really important that your high 4, your G sharp is high. Otherwise, it sounds kind of awful, okay? Especially since you're going to an A next. Okay, so we're starting in third position, and even though I'm going to lead you through it at a slow tempo, I still want you to please, as much as possible, try to do the articulation markings that are in there, okay? So as for the eighth notes with the dots over them, that usually means to play them short and staccato. But after listening to the piece, I think it's a little bit more appropriate if we treat it a bit off the string and more of a brushy spiccato kind of stroke. So if you've never done that before, it's easiest to do in the balance point of your bow, and you really have to make sure that your fingers and your thumb are nice and relaxed, and that your wrist is also going to be able to move. So I'm just going to play it on an E. So if you can see, most of what I'm doing is I'm drawing a very wide smiley face in the air, or I'm trying to with my bow. So watch that again. You're gonna notice that's different from like this kind of spiccato. So if you're noticing that your sound isn't as brushy, or it sounds too sharp and pointy, then maybe it's because you're just dropping the stick down on the string, like. So you do need a little bit more horizontal action. Make sure you keep your bow a little bit closer to the string, and it'll be easier to get that brushy spiccato. Okay, cool. We're starting in third position. You're fingering 2, 3, 4, and then you're just crossing over to the E string for the A, okay? And very important, you're going to subdivide for the dotted rhythms. So at this tempo, we're going 1 and 2 and 1 and 2 and. Okay, I'm gonna start. So 1 and 2 and 1. 1 and. So if you notice right at 21, I had to count the 1 E and the. 1 E and the. You want to make sure that the dotted eighth note doesn't get cut off too early. So 1 E and the. Cool. Now, The reason why I started you in third is because it's a lot easier to shift to fifth position for the optional divisi. Now, in this sense, it's not optional. Everyone has to play the top line for the audition. Now, if you do get into region, then we're going to split it probably. We might split it. I don't know. We have to check with Mrs. Watley. But we want everyone to learn the fifth position material. So that means in measure 22, instead of just jumping randomly to fifth position and hoping for the best that you get the E, you're going to actually practice this. So right at 22, you have F sharp, E, E. Now, since you just played an F sharp, the easy way to get into fifth position is if you just replace where your 3 was for your F sharp. Okay, so you're going to move your 1 up to where it was. If you notice, I took my thumb with me. So my thumb was down here before. Whenever I shift, I have to keep my thumb with me. And I'm going to match exactly where the pitch was. And then if I lay my 3rd finger down, it should be right in 5th. Okay? So I know sometimes that it doesn't make sense because you're like, oh, that's a lot smaller of a space than when I was in 1st position. Keep in mind, the higher you go up in your fingerboard, the smaller the spaces between the notes get. So you have to keep your hand proportional, okay? So when you are shifting up to 5th position, just be like, okay, my 3rd finger is not gonna be as far away from my 1 as it was when I'm all the way by the scroll. Okay, so let's do that again. I would literally practice this. Instead of resting in the 8th rest that's written, I would just go ahead and play another F sharp, but in 5th position. So look at my hand. This is 22. 3, 2, 2. Match with your 1. And then I would play the next note of the next measure. Okay, so I'll do that again. 3, 2, 2. Shift up, take your thumb. 1, 3. And if we do that in tempo without the stop, it'll be 3, 2, 2, 1, 3. That's a really good way to practice it. Make sure every time that you are really matching your 1 to the way that your 3rd finger sounded. If it sounds a little bit off, like that was a lot off, then you gotta do it again. Practice it until it becomes consistent. And then eventually, it'll be a lot easier for you to do that. And of course, even when you are doing it as written with the rest, you can still put your 1st finger down there. Okay, so if you watch my left hand, I'll play it as written right now. Okay, so you saw my 1st finger still went to where we practiced putting it, but I just didn't move my right hand, so you didn't hear it. But it sounds exactly how it is when written. Okay, so always keep that in mind. Now, for this part, 5th position, I'm going to walk you through the fingerings. 3, 1, 3, 4, 2, 3, up. And then now, when the subdivision, 1 E and da. When you're doing that, 1 E and da, you try to go maybe to at least the middle of your bow, like if you're coming from the frog. Okay, and then the A and the B, you're going to play on the A string. You're not going to shift down. You're just staying in 5th position. So 3, 4 is the fingering there. 3, 4. And then C sharp, you play back on the E string. And something cool about there is you had just played your A, right, on the A string. You can just leave your 3 down. So this is right after the dotted 8th note and 16th note rhythm. I'm going 3, 4, holding down my 3. So I don't need to find it again. All right, and then from there I play the F sharp D, and for that my fingers are going to be super close together. And then from there, 1, 3, 1, cross over 3. Again, make sure that your hand and your fingers are super tall when you're playing in 5th because that makes it a lot easier. And then 4th finger B. 2nd finger right underneath where your 3rd finger just was, and then back to your A, 3rd finger. Okay, so if we do the entire 5th position section, I'll do it slowly, and then I'll keep my hand here so you can see it, okay? 1 and 2, 1 E and So you're always going to just stay right in position. It's a lot easier than shifting back up and down. All right, so now that we've gotten to the end of that, I have to talk about the musical phrase. So from the beginning of the excerpt just until where we ended, that is one character. It says fortissimo, so you want to play everything very strong. Now, when you are practicing it, I would advise against using your whole bow to make it fortissimo. I would try putting in a little bit more arm weight so that when you make it the faster tempo, you're not going to suddenly be like, oh my gosh, I can only play loud if I play with my entire bow. That's not true, okay? So when you're playing it slow, fortissimo, you're going 1 and 2 and 1. You're still saving your bow. I'm not going all the way to the tip. If anything, this is where I'm living. And 2. And if you're hearing all of the staccato, I'm trying to get a pretty clear start to the beginning of the note, so it sounds very crisp. And the way I'm doing that is I'm just pressing in just a tiny bit at the beginning of each of the notes. Okay, so when you translate that to the faster tempo, it'll sound like this, and you're gonna notice I'm still using around the same amount of bow, if not less. Okay, so 120 is around like 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 2. It's very controlled in the lower half of your bow. Yes. Okay, cool. Now, once you reach that first ending and you're going into the pickup to 29, that's where the character changes. So you see mezzo forte and cantabile. So cantabile, if you don't know, that translates into singing. So this is where the more brushy spiccato will come in. For this section, from this pickup to 29 all the way to measure 40, I would say you're not going to use anywhere near the frog or anywhere near the tip. You're really just going to be the true middle of the bow and the balance point, okay? So I'm going to start right at that pickup to measure 29, so that mezzo forte to cantabile. I'm coming in on the and of 2 for your beat, okay? So 1 and 2. Because that's the end of that phrase. Now, if you noticed, even though it's really easy for me to be able to like use my full bow in this section, I'm not gonna do it, because what's gonna happen when you speed it up, you're gonna be like, oh my gosh, I'm running out of bow, or you're gonna think like you have to use that much, and then it's automatically gonna be too loud and it's not gonna fit the character. So you always want to practice, even though it's slow, still in the right part of the bow. Okay, so pick up to 29. Let's do it together. I will count out loud the subdivisions for you. Okay. 1 and 2. 1 E and the 2 and 1 E and the 2 and 1 and 2 and 1 and 2. 1, 1 and 2 and 1 and 2. 1 and 2. 1 and 1 and. Now, also very important is whenever you have those slurred 16th notes, sometimes we want to rush through them, especially since they're going up, so that it's really easy to try to go and then the beat gets away from you. Always practice it, even if it's slow, practice it with a metronome so you're keeping very strict time. Dun, da, 1 E and a, or 1 and 2 E and a, so that you don't start rushing when you put it faster. Okay. As for intonation, really important that you are using your high 3 Now it doesn't really matter in those slurred 16th notes in measure 33. It doesn't really matter if you use your fourth finger or your open D. Whichever one's going to be more in tune for you. Okay? I think using your open D there is a good option. And then dun dun dun. All of those notes have to be very precisely in tune. Spend some time on the G string, making sure that you are very familiar with how your elbow needs to come around and into your chest a little bit when you need to reach over. So really remember, the only way that you can play in tune is if you're on the tips of your fingers, so that you can quickly adjust if you ever need to. So you're gonna see, like, my elbow came in just a little bit more especially when I put down my form, and that's because my pinky's a little bit shorter than a lot of people's, but I have to do what I have to do in order to compensate for that. Okay, so for me, that's bringing my elbow in, and I think that helps a lot of people. Also, what I wanted to talk about here is whenever you have those ups for the eighth notes. So example is measure 30. You want to try to make sure that you're not accenting one over the other. It's a little bit difficult to get that effect. So instead of, I think for right now, because I did not ask the conductor how she wants those eighth notes to be treated, I think it's safe to say that there should be space between it, but it's more gentle. It should not be like where it's all stuck on the string, but as long as there's that air and kind of wispy feeling in the middle of the note, not the center of the note, the middle, then it should be okay. Now, if you want to get really technical with it and have a little bit more of a challenge, the way that I'm doing the brushy spiccato is, again, the more horizontal feeling. And then for the ups especially, I'm just drawing circles with my hand like this. This is essentially the movement that my hand and my fingers are doing to get that, like, up. It's like up, very gentle. You don't want to go because that's going to reflect in your sound like that. So everything is moving slowly and together, very gentle. Down, down, up, down, up, down, up. So you're still hearing the sound ring in between each note. And that only works if you do it in a circle. If you're setting too fast, like, then of course you're going to hear that setting of your bow. I over-exaggerated it so you could really hear it, but that's the same point. Okay, cool. What did I just want to say? Oh yes, still try to make sure that you're not rushing to beat 2. I know that this rhythm seems really easy. It's 30, 31, 32, 33, 34, where you just have quarter, eighth, eighth. But after you've been playing all of these dotted rhythms, it's very easy to try to rush to beat 2. So you're 1 and 2 and. I would really recommend subdividing your head. Even though it's just a quarter note, subdivide your eighth notes. So you're going 1 and up, up. And the same thing happens in 38. 1 and up, up. So the F sharps only start on beat 2, not any beat before. Okay, cool. I'll play the mezzo forte cantabile at a faster tempo so that you can practice it with me. Okay, and try your best to follow the bow wings. Those are very important. Okay, we start up bow with this mezzo forte. 1 and 2. 1 and 2. 1 and. 1 and 2. 1 and 2. Cool. So you notice with that measure 40, there's going to be a little crescendo up to forte. So This forte section that's literally only for 3 measures is going to kind of match the character that you started the excerpt with. So what I need you to practice, if you're going to do that crescendo, which you should, it's on an up bow, so you should be able to use the gravity and the weight of the bow to help you. But to aid that, press in with your index finger just a little bit. And then you're going to quickly swivel your arm over to the E strings and press in so that you can truly get a good start to the note. Okay, if you don't press into the string, then the sound is not going to be as clear. So even with the crescendo, you might catch a couple of the in-between strings. So you gotta move fast, stop your bow, and then swivel. You can hear that kind of crunch. That's fine. You're not gonna hear that in the actual excerpt because you're actually gonna pull your bow. So that again, subdivide the 16th note. It's very important for your rhythmic integrity. Okay, so just to reiterate, you're always looking for rhythmic integrity with your subdivisions, and also your intonation is very important. Making sure that your C sharps and your G sharps are very high and in tune, and they're in tune with your instrument. The last thing is I would try to really pay attention to the articulation markings that are in the piece, as well as the dynamics. So at least doing the 2 characters, so the strong one that's very confident being like I'm here, and then the cantabile section being a little bit more gentle but still pretty and light and bouncy is going to help you bring out that musicality. All right, I also just want to reiterate, as judges, we are always looking for accuracy rather than matching exactly like 120 is the speed that I need to go at, okay? So it's okay if maybe during audition day you play at like 115 or like 110. Would much rather have you play with accurate rhythms, really good intonation, and really good musicality at a slower tempo rather than rushing through it and playing at 120 but playing it not so well. Okay, we're always listening to that behind the curtain. So please keep that in mind while you're practicing. And of course, if you have any questions, you can leave them in the comments, and also ask your director for some in-person help too. But good luck with your audition, and hope to see you at Regent.